In this video, I wanted to give the rundown of my recent odyssey to Scotland, in which I did the NC500, and my hope is that this video will be of use to any bikers in particular who are planning to do the NC500 in the future, who perhaps haven't done it before and are wondering what it's all about and what are some of the pitfalls, what are some of the things that could potentially go wrong, and what to expect. So I'll start off with the good things from this trip. First of all, number one good thing was my motorcycle, the Yamaha MT10, which served as my workhorse for this trip. There was a minor issue with my bike, which I'll come on to in the things that went badly section, but it was pretty minor, all things considered. It happened on the last day when I was traveling back to England, and it did not prevent me from enjoying my trip. So hats off to the motorbike itself. It's a big bike, it's a 1 litre bike. It's not the most known for being the most fuel economy performing bike. It's not known for having the biggest tank out there. So those were some of the concerns which I'll come on to later in a bit in this video in terms of the limitation of the bike. But overall, the bike was solid. In fact, even the tyre pressure, I had purposely slightly over-pressurized the tyres, so they were a little bit over what the recommended amounts were, anticipating that the tyre pressures would drop during the intensive biking and the roads and the sheer number of miles covered and hours of riding. However, when I got back and checked the tyre pressures, they were pretty much in order. So that tells me that when you're going biking, touring for a week, you may get away with not having to check the tyre pressures too much. In fact, I didn't check the tyre pressures while I was up there at all. Although I did inspect the bike each morning before I jumped on it and sort of kick the tyres, make sure that they weren't going flat or anything like that. So as I mentioned, the particular bike that I ride is not known for being the most fuel efficient, although Yamaha have come some way in improving this issue compared with the earlier versions of the MT10. However, I've got to say, I did not have any problems with finding fuel. Probably the stretch where there were the least amount of available filling stations was when I cut across from Thurso across the very north of the mainland UK, ending up in Lochbroom near Garve. My accommodation there after day 4 effectively. That was where there were probably the least amount of filling stations. I think I've got that right. It was just based on my observation. Nevertheless, I did not get stuck. I did get caught a few times with dropping just below half a tank, and I did not allow my tank to go to near empty. I just fueled up wherever I had the opportunity, basically. Sometimes even when the tank was showing as full, if I knew that I'd been riding an hour and a half, I know that fuel gauges on bikes are not exactly very precise. They do suddenly drop from full to half full. They do on my bike anyway. I think it's something to do with the shape of the fuel tank. So yeah, I never really got below half a tank anywhere on the journey, so no problems, even though that was one thing I was a little bit concerned about before I set out on the journey. I did actually have a couple of fuel canisters in my top box, but I actually did not need to bother about bringing them. So if you're thinking of doing that, I personally would say if it makes you feel better, do it, but you probably don't need to bother. One of the things I was a little concerned about as well was things like motorcycle theft, but it's so sort of sparsely populated up there, and there just does not seem to be an abundance of people with ill intent. And so in the end, I was really not worried. I was chaining my bike up, putting a cover over it each night. I have got a pretty good lock for the bike that's resistant to angle grinders and things. Only on one occasion did I chain my bike to a lamppost outside one of the hotels. And that was only because the lamppost was there and available. At other hotels there wasn't a lamppost to chain my bike to, but I was able pretty much always to tuck it out of sight and Did not get my bike nicked, so that was a plus thing, although I do have this kind of tracker thing on my bike. I don't know how effective that would be really in reality if I did get my bike pinched, but I took that for extra reassurance, shall we say, peace of mind. Did not get a flat tyre, I did not get a mechanical failure or any issues like that. My workhorse was sturdy and reliable, although there is a small issue with the bike which I'll come on to when I get to the things that went wrong section. One thing that is a negative in Scotland is the weather. One of the hosts in the B&B that I stayed at Clacking Garden B&B, actually told me that August is getting a bit of a reputation for having some freakish weather. And he was kind of recommending maybe May or June or July for doing the NC500 rather than August. Sure enough, I did get caught out by the storm Flores, which scuppered my opportunity to do the Applecross Pass. You can see my video, part 5, on what I did and how I got around that, because I still had to bike to my accommodation. So I'm going to put that down as a plus, a positive and a negative. I'll talk about the negatives of it in a moment. But a positive was I survived Storm Flores. So you can bike and survive through some pretty intense rain and wind. I'm not gonna lie, the wind, especially when you're going over bridges, it was intense, and I had both feet out to prevent my bike falling over. There were times when I was leaning against the wind, but there were times when I was allowing cars to overtake me, can you believe it? Lorries, buses and things, just because I just did not have the confidence to ride fast in that kind of 85 mph wind. But again, it's a plus. I survived the storm. Another great plus from this trip was the accommodation. I'll review the accommodation again towards the end of this video, but all of the hotels and the glamping pod that I stayed in were super. One hotel I can't recommend because it's got a really steep gravelly drive and it's really crap for bikers to get up and down it, particularly down it actually. Major pain, but the hotel itself is beautiful. It's just a shame they haven't tarmacked the drive. So yeah, I was able to plan the trip way in advance, but the accommodation way in advance. I don't know what the experience would have been like if I tried to book it like the week before, because a lot of places up there I noticed had no vacancy signs on display. It's a particular popular time of year to be up in Scotland in August, that's for sure. There were a lot of people up there. I would say the beauty of Scotland, the Scottish Highlands, and even the Lowlands, even as soon as like a minute or two across the border from England, that beauty far exceeded my expectations. I knew it was going to be beautiful when I actually got there. To me, it felt like Iceland in the summer minus the volcanic activity. It was, to me, just as beautiful, and with the lochs and the mountains and the sea, the beaches, the castles, the ruined castles, just the whole package is breathtaking, and I was gobsmacked. It exceeded my expectations for sure. One thing that I'm really glad I did is I had an old-fashioned bum bag. And that's just super helpful for storing keys, phone, wallet, checking, double checking, triple checking that I had both sets of keys, so the ignition and all the keys for all the locks, which I kept on separate bundles purposely. Having the bum bag was just really convenient. I thought on day 2 that I'd lost a bank card. I thought I'd left it in the waterfall car park that I visited. Couldn't find it anywhere. Turns out it was buried at the bottom of my rucksack, so it was fine. So yeah, definitely have a bum bag if you go biking on a tour, if you go biking anywhere, it's just so convenient. Another thing that went well was the video footage. On the whole, I managed to capture the essential parts of the journey that I needed to make my videos. Now, I did have a combination of ghost cameras, although they really weren't great. The stabilization is just too poor. One of them I did manage some good audio with, relatively good audio with on the first day, but then the wind interference was too much, and I've got to come up with a better solution for audio, full stop, for my biking, motor vlogging. So it was between the GoPro Hero 12 and the Insta360 X4. My Insta360 ended up letting me down, but actually, as I'll come on to that in a moment, it was my fault really. So really it's the solid GoPro that actually got me across the line. So it would be disappointing, I think, if you lost an entire day's worth of video footage, because it's not like you can whiz around the NC500 as many times as you want a year. It's a real sacrifice and difficulty to get up there and do it. So I'm just grateful that my video footage went well. But I would say, do have more than one 4K video. You've got to shoot in 4K. Do bring something that you can back up the files onto so that you can clear the storage, or perhaps have, you know, a number of SD cards for that purpose. Have some additional batteries, because most cameras are going to be knackered after about an hour. Or perhaps a means of recharging them quickly while you're on the move. And do have more than one camera. So I had the GoPro and the Insta. I recommend it if a big part of your journey is to capture the experience on film.
Kind of crazy up in here. Everybody wants to ride in the water slide. Baby, if you're looking for some crazy.
The final big plus I'm going to mention, I'm sure there's many more if I thought about it that I could mention, but I'm just going to mention this final one. That is, I did not get lost. My sat-nav, between my sat-nav and my Google Maps on my phone, I did manage, and I did use both of those, by the way. There were times when I couldn't get a signal on my phone, and the standard Garmin sat-nav proved to be the most reliable at that point. So I did not get lost. That was a plus. Not so difficult really to find your way around. The way that I did it is I had multiple destinations, multiple postcodes along the route to put into my navigation devices, and I made sure that I had ready access to those both on my phone and also written down just in case my phone failed for some reason, so I could, and most certainly the final destination postcode, so I wouldn't end up in a position where I had no way of knowing where I was going. Alright, so let's come on to some of the things that didn't go so well for me on this trip that I don't consider as pure negatives, because I consider this whole experience as very character building and also an opportunity to learn some lessons for the next tour. The next tour, by the way, that I'm planning is going to be Ireland and the wild Atlantic coast, etc. That'll be the next one, so watch this space. So the first negative, I would say, Storm Flores, amber weather warnings, 85 mile per hour, winds, getting battered with the rain and wind. That messed up my opportunity to do the Applecross Pass, which is kind of the creme de la creme of the NC500, especially for bikers, with the hairpin bends on the road and the beauty of it. So instead of doing Applecross, I went from one accommodation to another. I did have opportunity to do things on the way in between those two, because there were some breaks in the weather, but I did get pretty heavily battered by the weather on that day. And in fact, at one point, there was a tree, big tree right across the road. But the chainsaw guys were already onto it, and I was impressed how quickly they responded. You can see that in my video, part 5. Right, let's come on to the big negative that happened on my bike. As I mentioned, I was riding through a storm, and the cigarette lighter style charger that I was using to keep my phone charged whilst on the move, that got moisture in it, and my phone started beeping at me to say remove the charger, it's beeping. And unfortunately I tried multiple times to see if it had dried out, to see if I could continue to charge my phone whilst on the way, and eventually ended up blowing a fuse, which then messed up my normal sat-nav. There was no power to it, so I was running that off battery, and at one point it actually ran out of battery. Fortunately for me, that happened on the very last day, when it was more or less, once I'd got past sort of the lowlands and Glasgow and that, it was more or less straight down the M6. I didn't really need a sat-nav. But if that had happened like on day one, that could have been a major inconvenience. So what I would say is, if you're faffing about with charging things from your bike in bad, wet, damp weather, just be a little bit careful on that one. That would be a lesson learned. You don't want to blow a fuse and end up with no navigation, or having to rely on battery power for a 5, 6, 7 hour journey for the day. Another disappointment, the Harry Potter viaduct. There were a few tourist traps. Some parts were definitely quieter than others. I mean, as soon as you head past Inverness, it does get really quiet, but the Harry Potter viaduct really was a tourist trap, and I had nowhere to park up and actually photograph the thing. The lady had closed the car park, and because I'd kind of messed about trying to find it, I'd ridden past it a few times and then eventually found it, and I was on a schedule and actually getting behind. I didn't have time to go and find an alternative parking and then walk over to it and photograph it. So yeah, if you want to see that Harry Potter viaduct, try and do it really early, because all the Americans, I think, are going there, and you might not get parked even on a bike. I tried to sort of leave the bike on the side of the road a bit further down. The lady ran over and told me that I couldn't. She was very kind actually. She offered to wait there with my bike while I grabbed a snap, but at that point I was just fed up, and I understood where she was coming from anyway. She was pretty good. So I didn't really get, I saw it, I got a glimpse of it, but I didn't get to photograph it. Loch Lomond is also a tourist trap, very busy, but on a bike it's not a problem. There's one particular busy road, probably the busiest road of the whole trip, alongside the Loch Lomond, and it's also a dangerous road, as one of the locals was telling me, who I stopped to have a chat with as well. I'd ended up at the wrong place at a golf course, and he was a biker actually, and chatty. He was telling me, be careful on this road. But even with Loch Lomond being a tourist trap, it was still beautiful, still worth seeing, definitely. So yeah, don't worry about it on a bike. You can overtake anyway. You can get through the traffic. The weather, I'm putting down as a positive and a negative. Positive because the first 3-4 days were beautiful, but then on day 5 I hit Storm Flores, which was like from sunny to horrible weather in an instant overnight. So be prepared for that, folks, when you go to Scotland, okay? And I'm told that it's happening more frequently in the month of August as well. The steep drive at the Highland Bear Lodge Hotel is the one reason why I couldn't recommend it for a biker, unless you've got some kind of adventure bike that can breeze it up and down really steep paths that are full of gravel. On my NC10 it was an absolute headache, and my bike couldn't cope with it well, I've got to say. So unfortunately that's one hotel I can't big up. Lovely hotel though, lovely hotel, good breakfast and everything. Just the drive was the pain. Another negative, I didn't always manage, in fact very rarely did I manage to get a square meal of an evening, because many of the accommodations that I arrived at were isolated, only offered breakfast, and so to eat would have required, in one case, pre-booking a table further into the village from the hotel, and another case getting back on the bike and going from the accommodation into Ullapool, parking the bike up, and after 6-7 hours of riding, 5-6 hours of riding, whatever it was, you're not going to be in the mood to do that. So I was grateful that I bought lots of snacks with me, including beef jerky, which was a really tasty one. And I didn't actually mind missing the evening meal, just as a means of, you know, not putting on too much weight and stuff, because you're not super active on, you know, you're on your backside for most of the tour, although I did have opportunities to get off the bike and walk to waterfalls and things like that. So yeah, you might find that getting an evening meal when you've been biking all day is a bit of a challenge. Do take some backup snacks with you. I recommend beef jerky, cereal bars, nuts, and you might need some whiskey miniatures as well to chill you out in the evening. I would say also one negative was storage and battery life on my cameras was borderline. I never reached the point where I'd run out because I had spare backup batteries. Storage did get a bit tight at times. Remember, I was shooting on 4K, so here's a strategy: bring spare batteries, spare cameras, spare SD cards if you don't want to have to worry about that during the day while you're riding. So those are my points, that's my feedback on the NC500. Overall, a resounding success, and I recommend that you do it. I did it solo. If you do it with friends, I expect it to be even better. Although I did enjoy being in full control of my daily itinerary and plans and going off on tangents, doing other things I hadn't planned for. I was fully in control of that, and also it's a chance to just clear my head and spend some time inside my own thoughts whilst taking in all the beauty of the Scottish Highlands and the thrill of riding my Yamaha bike. So you're going to love it if you go up there. There might be one or two things that go wrong. Hopefully I've alerted you to some pitfalls and you can avoid those. Hopefully this video is helpful with that, but if you're planning on going, you're planning a noble thing, and I'm pretty sure you're going to really enjoy it. So ciao for now, happy biking.